Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of ABZU Deep Dive. So now that we've just gone through the ruins of the flooded temple and saw a lot of very weird species like the coelacanth and the bonnet-head shark, now we're going to be moving on to the next chapter. So we're just going to make our way. We'll see how it goes. Time to make our way. Ooh, spooky. Now let's see where we'll go next. Isn't this fun? Oh. What animal do you think is going to come now? Oh my gosh, is that what I think it is? Now guys, if you don't recognize what that is a blue whale. One of the largest animal to ever exist on planet Earth. Known to be, the largest ones recorded have been about 33 meters long. They weigh about 190 tons. And are known for basically just being the biggest animal, and found all over the world, and literally from the Arctic to Antarctica. They swim up to the tropics like other baleen whales to breed, and then they go down to feed on krill, which is actually they're one of the few whales that exclusively feed on krill, believe it or not. And they've been dated to be, a lot of them have been known to live for about, using earwax, they managed to try and date the whales' ages, and they've been found to be about, the oldest one they found is about 73 years old for a pygmy blue whale, which is not really, it's a subspecies created by man because we've hunted all the biggest individuals down in the time of whaling. So that we know that they at least get around 70 to potentially maybe even 100 years old. So very interesting. And they're actually particularly fast whales. Well, not super fast, but they usually swim at about 7 kilometers an hour, just chilling. And then they can reach speeds, and they can swim about 122 kilometers a day, which is, considering how big they are, it's pretty good distance. That's just chilling. They're not really going really fast, and basically feed on whatever they can. They pretty much exclusively eat krill, as I said, and they feed similar to humpback whales. They will lunge feed, which we'll see later on. They often just sit back and just open their mouths and let their throat expand, and then they pull as much water as they can into their mouths, and then they will filter it out using the baleen, which is highly modified teeth and hair, which they use to sift out all the water but leave the krill inside to be swallowed. And speaking of swallowing, they actually have a throat that is only about the width of a loaf of bread. So if you think about the large animal has such a tiny throat, it's because it's not adapted for eating large animals. It eats lots and lots of really small animals in a bulk fashion. So it's pretty incredible. And they're not very deep divers. They like to stay around 700 meters under the surface. Not even 700 meters. The deepest confirmed dive for a whale is 506 meters, so they're not particularly deep divers, but they do like to go up, they do like to dive down and then lunge up up into a shoal of krill to grab as many as they can. And even like in a day they could eat basically a dump truck full of krill, just because it's that efficient. And usually they are, at about 10 years old, females become sexually mature, and at about a length of 23 meters, that's when they become first sexually mature and able to have babies. Even though females are larger than males, so the males are the same age, probably about 18 meters long. So with most big baleen whales, the females are larger because they have to take more resources to feed their calves when they go up to breed. And the babies are huge. Babies can get up to 7 meters long and weigh 3 tons, which is basically the size of a small elephant. So that's pretty big. And you hear this statistics: their tongue's bigger than an elephant. You can crawl in their heart. Small kids can swim through their arteries. It just describes the magnitude of their size. And it's just ridiculous. And then, similar to other baleen whales, they can make really deep bellows which echo throughout the ocean. So that's how they communicate with each other, because they're very solitary. They like to do their own thing, but they do occasionally join up in groups. So the populations now, which has been very well studied, but I'll lump it up. The most recently species is believed to be about 10,000 to 25,000 living blue whales, which is actually only 11% of what they believed to be in 1911, which is, even though it's on the rise, they estimated that 382,595 blue whales were caught between 1868 and 1978. So that's a huge amount of whales. That just shows how diverse they were and how impoverished their population is now. Now just down to, at minimum, 10,000. It's only a tenth of what they once were. Now these guys are really subjective to a lot of threats. They often get struck by large ships, because obviously being the biggest thing in the ocean, you don't need to look out for much stuff. So they often get hit by these large ships. They often get trapped in nets. Like a lot of other whales, when they put sonar, boats use sonar, it can really disorient whales, because whales also use their own form of sonar to help communicate with other whales and find their way across the ocean. So it can be very disorienting for them. They're also susceptible to pollutants, like, of course, chemicals, plastic, all that. And lots of oil as well, because oil rigs, when they break down, and like the big oil spills that have been happening recently, often just a lot of chemicals get into the lungs, can be very bad. And also climate change. Obviously climate change has really affected the populations of krill because of the sea ice melting, which means less food for the whales, which means less whales, sadly. Now they are very big, so that means in their ecosystem they only have one predator, and it's pod of orcas. And these pod of orcas have special behaviors that they have learned to hunt these whales. So they're kind of specialized. It's kind of like how a group of people can specialize to hunt one certain thing. It's the same with these animals. And they actually have been on the rise since they've been protected from whaling recently, because of the Endangered Species Act in America, and a lot of other places have decided to protect these whales, and their numbers are steadily on the rise. Though with all these issues, especially with climate change becoming an issue in the next 10 to 20 years, we really don't know how long that increase is going to happen, because blue whales might become without food, and then we'll basically have no whales, sadly. So one thing that we got to do to help protect them is what we do with all oceans. We need to make sure that we keep them clean, we make sure we keep our ice caps, and we make sure that these whales will be with us for a long time to come. So we'll slowly just do this. And then we will go and have a look at this big mama here. Isn't that beautiful? Look, this really gives you a sense of their scale. That baby's already the size of an elephant. And one thing about these animals is they look deceptively skinny. It's just that they're so ridiculously thick, because they're quite like a long cylinder, they're like a tube. We see more blue whales. Oh wow. Isn't that beautiful? Seeing whales in pods like this would not be too often, especially with blue whales. Now we see an example of them lunge feeding. So look, you can see that here. The throat expands and they filter out the water through there. There's some friends. We've got some humpbacks coming. I've covered with humpbacks in another video. Aren't they beautiful? Oh, see that? Lunge feeding. So look, you see the baleen there. And we see up in there. Look at that guy. Isn't that beautiful? Really good sense of their size. Tumble, tumble. Whee! This really shows off how big these animals are. And this is where we are now. We've left our friends the whales, and now they've taken us to the dark depths of the ocean. We've got to be careful around here. What we see here is another thing that's found a lot in the dark depths of the ocean are hydrothermal vents. Now these are vents that are basically spewing out. It's just the hot chemicals that are under the earth, like from magma and such. They just escape through these hydrothermal vents and create like an oasis in the ocean, especially in the dark depths of the ocean, because being with no light, there is basically no plants, which means there's really like not that much of a basis for a healthy ecosystem. So these are kind of like an oasis where a lot of species, which we'll see later of course, tend to survive in and use it as like an oasis in the desert. Along with another thing which we'll have a look at. We'll have to spot, here we are, we see these bones of whales and such. These are called whale falls, but they don't just apply to whales, they basically apply to any large animal that dies and falls down to the bottom of the ocean. So they provide another oasis, so you have like an ecosystem full of animals that are believed to be like, and they found 173 different species of worms, fish and stuff hanging around a dead whale. So it shows how important these whale falls and marine snow and such is important to these deep sea ecosystems, which is really interesting to see. I think what I want to find is our largest animal down here, because there's not too many big ones. I want to find our goblin sharks. There we are, there's a goblin shark. And we can see this is called the midnight zone because no light reaches down past 300 meters, and we believe this is what can you ride them? There we are, we can. We'll have a look at the goblin shark. Now, that's only a beautiful animal. The goblin sharks is a very rare species of deep sea sharks that live basically in deep sea oceans around the world, like continental slopes and canyons and seamounts. Pretty much anything greater than 100 meters. Oh, he's going for feed. Hopefully we get to watch them again do that, because one really interesting thing that they do in Alpha Depicted is they have this really weird mouth, but they often hide it in their body, so when they want to attack, they'll often just go stack it out, kind of like pops out, kind of like a bobbit worm or something. It just pops out and grabs prey, which is really, really interesting. And they can get pretty big. They can get up to about 3 meters long. They're a very decent sized animal. And they have been have this really weird long snout, which we don't know why they had. It's just something that a lot of deep sea creatures have. They tend to be very weirdly shaped. And it's very, very cool animals. Probably got a lot of and with their jaws extends really drastically while they feed. Let's see if you get anything to feed from there. Watch. So look, you saw that? That's how they expand to Oop, just hurt me. That's alright, we're just following the shark. That's okay. So that when they expand, they use it to catch prey, like we just saw there. And it's not very too differently shaped other than that from other sharks. Obviously they're very deep sea. Pretty much found from everywhere that's deep sea. And we know that they're very slow and sluggish, which means that a lot of deep sea creatures like that, because food is not very common, they tend to just do their own thing and try and catch what they can. But there have been seen to have been preyed by blue sharks and other pelagic species. And they tend to feed a lot on other deep sea fish like dragonfish, rat tails, and also crustaceans and all sorts of different things. And often, a lot of what we know from all these creatures are just mainly specimens that we've seen just caught in nets and such, because we have literally no idea. We only have explored 5% of the ocean, and and there's so much more that we can find. Pretty much every expedition to see the bottom of the ocean, we find something new. It's really that unexplored and harsh to the human form. Like, if we were a real human, like this was a robot, we would be crushed under like 300 elephants worth of pressure per square inch. So imagine 300 elephants standing on your back. Imagine how crushing that would be. So it makes it very hard to study. So it's always very interesting to see how these species survive down in these depths and what new things we can find. So now we'll move on to our meditating spots. We can have a look at what else we can find. Just need to find that. Very hard when it's dark. There it is. Now what you see around here is called marine snow, which is like all sorts of just biological particles. Like it could be dead pieces of whale skin, decomposed, just literally just any sort of dead living matter. Kind of like crumbs almost from the surface, dribbled down, and these guys clean it all up. So now we'll move on to whatever species comes up. Here we got a viper fish. Now, look at these ridiculous fish. We can see a lot of these fish are very ridiculously looking. They can get up to 60 centimeters long, so about 2 feet long, and live at depths around 250 meters, and often in the daytime, and then they often go down. At night time they often go up to the surface because it's dark, and then at night they come up, and then at day they go back into the dark depths of the ocean. And they are like a lot of other fish that live down in the ocean, the parts of the ocean. They have a thing called bioluminescence, which means they produce their own light. And you can see here, like with the eyes and the anglers that they have there, that's how they tend to attract prey. And they have been believed to, believe it or not, live about 30-40 years in captivity, but 30-40 years in the wild, but they don't live very, very long in captivity. I'm sorry, I misread that. Just because being such a deep sea species, you can't really survive in an aquarium. We don't really know how much they are. So they're found in very deep waters, and you can see they have very huge teeth, and they like to prey on things like latonfish that we'll see later. They often they have these huge teeth and are able to expand their jaws and their stomachs to be able to catch whatever they can find, because literally anything in the ocean could be your last meal, so you always got to try and find the biggest thing you can and eat them, so their mouths and stuff can expand. And they use these long teeth to help trap their slippery prey inside them. They're literally just trying to attack what they can. There we are. We've moved on to a Tomopetros, which is a very, very, very weird type of it's called a polycete, which is like a giant plankton almost. It's a very weird taxonomically. It's a type of worm, and they're quite interesting because they have this kind of bioluminescence. Oh, that really ended my chances. I think we'll move on over here. Then we'll have a look at you later. There we are. Another one. They're a type of worm, not a type of plankton. I'm sorry about that. You can see how interesting they look, and there's a few different species, but these ones get yellow bioluminescence, which is very interesting. They're the only marine animal that has that. And they're not very big. They often only get about a few inches long, but even though that the ones that are caught often are very small, they believe that some can get pretty big, and are definitely a very worthy addition to this game because they just look so weird to anything else. Very interested to see how these guys swim. They often swim with like an undulating pattern like that. You can see how incredible that is. So let's see what else we can move on to. There's another one. There's another one. Maybe had a look at the Goblin shark. Have a look at a Humboldt squid. What do you think of that? Another Humboldt squid. So Humboldt squids are also known as jumbo squids, and found pretty much in the eastern Pacific Ocean. They're pretty large too. They get about 1.5 meters long. Obviously not as large as giant squids, but we're going to keep those for later. They have actually known for being pretty aggressive to humans, and often they've been known to eat each other. And they often, when fishermen come, they often flash themselves these colours, like see they're red and white, as like a threat display. It's very weird and interesting to see. And they often found at depths between 200 and 700 meters. And they live into huge shoals, over 1,000 individuals, and that swim up to about 24 kilometers through a siphon, or hydronome, which is a small little tube that you can see in the corner there that they push water out of, sort of like a jet. And they are just very interesting. They tend to attack, obviously, as I said, become aggressive when they see something that they don't understand. So look, that flashing red or white is a threat display. So it's often when they see something they don't like, they often just flash that. And they often feed on things like small crustaceans, whatever they can really find in the ocean, like that. See, they're being good for me. They're eating what I want them to eat. And they usually, when they see something, they'll shoot out with their tentacles and drag them into their mouths. Which is very cool to see. They've often been portrayed in media as like a monster fish, but in reality they're just an animal, just like every other one. That's just their behavior to react aggressively to divers. And they have been affected by ocean acidification, sadly. Like that means they have to retreat to shallower waters because of ocean acidification, because there's basically like less oxygen in the ocean just because of the acidity. So they often have to go to shallower waters so they can get a little bit more oxygen. It's a little bit sad, but clearly a very interesting squid that we hope to see live for a long while. Let's move on to the next species. Here we've got viperfish, we've done those. And the goblin shark. So look how big this area. We got it. This is, even though it says anglerfish, I've figured out the particular species called the humpback anglerfish, which is a very famous anglerfish. Is found in between 1,000 and 4,000 meters where there's no light, so they use a little angle on their head to try and find food. And this is actually a female of the species, because the males have that very extreme sexual dimorphism. The males are basically look like little parasites that when they find a female they latch on and then they become a part of her. So they're like, even their circulatory systems join up, so she basically just uses him for sperm. He's like a living sperm bank, and all they do is she just lives off her, and she obviously eats everything, which is so weird. But nevertheless, that's still a very cool and interesting deep sea fish that we need to conserve. See what else we can find. We just had a look at you. Now, we all know the blobfish. Now, blobfish are... Let me just find the blobfish. Yeah. The blobfish are a deep sea... They're actually found around mainland Tasmania and Australia, in the deep ocean there, and even around New Zealand. And they don't get longer than 30 centimeters. And live at depths between 6 and 12,000 meters, with pressures like 120 times greater than sea level. So they're very, very squished under the huge pressure of the ocean, which makes them look weird when they come out. They often look like a really weird looking fish, but you see here they look like a pretty normal looking fish, just their bodies are built for the pressures. And since they're very soft, and they often are found in bycatch, because of obviously the huge nets in the deep of the ocean, and they often feed on things like they pretty much feed whatever they can. So, but they do like deep sea crustaceans and such. And they the reason they look so blobbinous is because of the decompression when they come up to the surface. That's what makes them look weird. And they look very normal when they're under the water, don't they? It's just we see these mean pictures of a fat blobfish, and that's just because of they come out of the ocean and their bodies are very soft and require the pressure to like stay together. So obviously we've got a goblin shark. We'll see what else we can find. Here we are. We got flappy whalefish. So we got to move to flappy whalefish wherever these are. Very interesting little fish. Here we are. Flappy whalefish there's not a particular species, but they're a very, very diverse group, where the juveniles are known as tape tails. So what's really weird is that they all live in these very deep oceans, and obviously in life they have this very orange color, reddish orange color, and they use basically use them to camouflage themselves, almost. Very interesting. And obviously, like other species, they can often open up their mouths very, very wide and use it to swallow different fish larger than themselves. So they're able to eat pretty much whatever they can. Very interesting looking. And now and usually, like other deep sea fishes, when it's night time, they often go up to the surface and hang around and chill. And their little babies, little like tadpoles, they were thought to be their own different species, but it turns out they were just immature specimens. And these smaller ones feed on small crustaceans, but these larger ones just feed on whatever they can get. So a very interesting group of fish. Couldn't find a particular species, but obviously still very interesting nonetheless. See what else we can find. We're going to look at you, viperfish. I think we are almost done here. And we'll have a talk about chimeras in the next area. Now let's talk about them now. So stuff it. Chimeras are also known as rabbitfish, are found around the Mediterranean. They grow up to 1.5 meters long and get about 2.5 kilos, and are very slow growers and get to about 40 years old. They're basically found in waters between 300 and 500 meters, and they deep, usually in their range, since they live around the Atlantic and Mediterranean. In the southern parts, they tend to live in deeper waters than in the north, and a lot of the fish that we find that studied are usually sick and dying and moving up to the stranded on beaches, which is kind of sad, but it's really the only way to learn about these species. And they feed on basically whatever they can find. They eat like crustaceans and mussels and echinoderms, and yeah, that's pretty much all we know about them because they're so elusive. Still a very interesting species. So I think we'll move on to what else we can find. We've got the Humboldt squid. He's gonna go for it. Yep, nom nom. Humboldts. I think we're pretty much done here, I think. See if we can get a good look at our little friends down on the ground. We see some horseshoe crabs that we've seen in other videos, but we also see some these Dumbo octopus, which are called a Dumbo octopus, of course, because they are very cute and have little ears like Dumbo. Actually very adorable. See if we can get a better look over here without running into one of those things that you can see them sitting there. They're very cute. We also see sea pigs. One thing, we'll talk about a Dumbo octopus. I think they were only fairly recently discovered, because they got their name from Dumbo, which is what I just mentioned. They live at least 3,000 or 4,000 meters in waters from New Zealand to Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, basically everywhere. They live in very deep waters, and obviously living at those depths, they are often eaten by anything that can get their mouth around them, which is pretty easy. And they like to swim with that's why they flap their little ears like Dumbo to help them swim. And they pretty much eat anything they can find, from anything at the bottom of the ocean. They're obviously very cute looking. And one thing we also see here is sea pigs. We'll have a look over here. Here's a good idea of a whale fall. You can see this one's very old because it's a skeleton. These little sea cucumber things there are called sea pigs, which are a type of sea cucumber which are very cute looking. They kind of remind you of pigs, that's hence why they're called sea pigs. And they live all across the ocean floor, feeding on whatever they can find, like marine snow and whale corpses and such. And they often been found in like areas 600 individuals per each trawl, and found between in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans at depths around up to about 5,000 meters. And there have even been some species found in Antarctica, believe it or not. So they basically live all over the world. So imagine what's going living in the dark depths of the ocean if they're everywhere. And they pretty much just do their own thing. They're just scavengers. That's their niche, and they're very cool. Let's see if we can find ourselves a Yeti crab. Now, Yeti crabs were only very recently discovered. Let's have a look at them. They were discovered in 2005 in the South Pacific Ocean, and they're very notable because they have adapted they're adapted to living in hydrothermal vents. So what they'll do is they'll put their arms over the vents and collect all the nutrients and bacteria from these to live around these vents, and like sift it on their arms and their hairy bristles, and then get to eat it themselves, which is very interesting to see. So they basically just use them to it's a very interesting species that has a niche that we never thought. Like, a lot of people thought that the dark depths of the ocean were uninhabitable. There was no life down there, but they found all these different like deep sea coral reefs and all this very interesting stuff that really put that to shame. And the thing is that the deep ocean is harder to explore than the moon, so there's been less people at the bottom of the ocean than the surface of the moon, so it's really made it hard to study. So that's very awesome. Oh, there's some lanternfish. We need to go and have a look at them. I think I missed them out. I'm sorry about that. Let me head back to wherever. There it is. We've got to find our lanternfish and then we'll move on, because I think that was the only one that was missing. Still very interesting species. There's a flappy whalefish. That's not what we're looking for. See if we can find them. Small flabby whalefish. We don't need any flabby whalefish. What we want is our lanternfish. What we see here, fangtooth. Oh, he's a very interesting fish. See that they're also adapted to expand their jaws and make sure they can feed on whatever they can. These guys are very well adapted for eating really, really big things. You can often see pictures of how distended their stomach gets from eating fish whole, and they use their big jaws to trap whatever fish they can inside their bodies, inside their mouths. So they're found in waters from pretty much is found from 5,000 meters down, but they can be seen at 200 to 2,000 meters. And juveniles like to stay up there though, and they often migrate during the day, often top and bottom. They feed in the depths, then come up, and then go back down, and basically just feed on whatever they can. They use their big teeth to try and trap make sure they can catch the slippery fish that they need. So that's why they look gross and scary. And they're not very particularly big. They're just about 16 centimeters long, and the southern one, there's the longhorn and the shorthorn, I think. The longhorn is the larger one. The shorthorn gets about half that size, so they get about 8 centimeters long. So it's another very interesting fish. Oh, it's a good example. You see that? Very, very cool and interesting. So I think we want to move on to a lanternfish. Yeah. Here we are. Then we got hagfish. The hagfish are a very, very interesting group of fish because they have produce a mucus and they look like an eel, and they are the only living animal that has a skull but no vertebra. So it's basically just the skull with a long tube and a very, very basal. They're believed to be a sister group to jawed vertebrates, and they've been the same for pretty much 300 million years. They haven't really needed to change much. So that's very interesting. They basically live in the bottom of the ocean wherever they can. They are scavengers, so they just feed on whatever. And they are useful a lot in a lot of studies, so they can see how, compared to how a lot of systems that we have in us and other vertebrates, like nervous systems and breathing, evolved, like very derived versions of that. So they haven't changed much in that time. There's been a lot of study on them, and they pretty much feed on everything that can get on. They just scavenge, they just eat whatever they can. Hermit crabs, bony fish, whale flesh, whatever they can get their claws on. So it's very interesting to see, even sometimes used as food in like places like Japan. Basically everywhere in Japan, basically all of China likes to eat, not just China, pretty much all of Asia just likes to eat all these weird and wacky wildlife, which is a little bit sad because a lot of it, especially with shark fin soup, just tends to go to waste. So we want to go back to our hagfish. Find a lanternfish once we're done. Very interesting species, those hagfish. A lot of different species in them, but I couldn't really find a particular one. But yeah, they just follow around the whatever they can scavenge on. There's some fish, I want to see it. So you can see all these hydrothermal vents around here. Here we are, here we see a lanternfish. Hopefully it doesn't get eaten for us. So lanternfish are very, very small species, but they're 300 and... was it, how many are there? 246 species only got eaten. It's because you're following the shoal, of course. There's believed to be about 426 species, 246 species in 33 genera, so that's quite a few. And they're found all over the bottom of the ocean, of course. Very deep dwelling species. And like other species, they come up to the surface during the night and then go back to the bottom to feed during the day. They're like the dark of the ocean. They do not like the sunlight. These are shoreline lanternfish. So they're pretty much found between 300 and 1500 meters, but when they come up to the surface, they can be between 10 and 100 meters, usually towards the night. And they often are very common for shoreline around. They're a very common prey species in the bottom of the ocean. But they're a major food source for a lot of animals like whales, dolphins, tuna, sharks, even sea lions and squid. They're basically kind of like the equivalent to whatever like the rabbits and the insects of the ocean, so they can basically kind of the foundation for the marine ecosystem, like down that depths. And what was really interesting that when people think that due to like deep trawling, that potentially lanternfish make up for about 80 to 65% of all the deep sea fish. So they're a very prevalent species in the deep ocean. So they're kind of form the basis of the marine ecosystem, which is really, really cool. A small underrated fish, but are very, very important because they provide food for many, many other large fish and a lot of other species. So they're very important to protect them. See if we can find them again. Keep losing them. That's okay. Just head out then. So yeah, we gotta make sure they protect. And we're gonna actually do the missions now. We're gonna actually play the game. Gotta avoid these zappy singy bits. See all these bones of dead whales. It makes you think how actually diverse these areas are. You'd think the ocean being with no plants at the bottom, very empty, but there's still plenty of life that you just can't see. I'm gonna pass some more lanternfish. I like how the shoals react to us. It's really interesting to see. Let's see what else we can find. Just make sure we don't get attacked. Turn them off. Does it open up for us? Then we're going to go to the other one. See them wiggity crabs and such. See all those cute little Dumbo octopuses? Or octopi, you could say. See, one thing that very fascinates me about the oceans is this deep sea, because it's just so unexplored. There's so many interesting things that we could find at the bottom of the ocean. There's even like a new species of beaked whale that was discovered only in 2019, and that's a pretty big animal. Got about 6 meters long. It was only just described in the past year. To think about if something that big was hidden for so long from our growing expansive knowledge of science. If something can stay hidden for that long, imagine what's lurking at the deep depths of the ocean that we have no idea exist. Now we just need to find the other one. I think we'll have to move out. We'll retrace our steps. See more lanternfish. See, this is a lot of these species down here, since there is no light, they often produce their own light, and it's a process called bioluminescence, which means they produce their own light. Let's see if we can get through there. Just not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome. Zing. Oh, there's a shark. I think I'll cover the shark in the last episode. Just because that's when we get the most time interacting with it. Great white shark. See a lot of ammonites and lots of fish. Oh shit. that spooked me. You can see the hatchet fish. Pretty sure those are hatchet fish. We'll have a cover of them when we get to. See, that just hurts everyone. I see he's trapped in there too. That sucks. One thing about these large pelagic sharks is that once they stop swimming, they basically can't breathe. Aren't we pretty strong? Oh, look at that majestic creature. Making her way through. Now we're making our way through. So you see a lot of mussels there. These are mussels that are specially adapted for the deep sea. They tend to live around hydrothermal vents. And just try and filter out what bacteria they can find. Ooh, look at that. Now we see some more whales. Now these are the sperm whales. They want to take us deeper. Now would you look at that? Now we're gonna have to you know what animal we're going to have to cover first, right? I'm going to save the giant squid for when we open that up, but we're going to have to cover the giant of the sea that we see swimming around. Just got to find him. There you are. I'll have a look at the Opa then, since they're not cooperating. Now, Opa are a very, very weird species. They're also known moonfish. They're basically found pretty much in cold water and deep water all across the world. And what's really interesting is that they are the first described species of warm-blooded fish. So basically, it's a fish that is metabolism similar to that of mammals, so they're able to constantly keep their body temperature stable, unlike something like a reptile or another species of fish, which makes them really interesting. And now they basically live their entire lives in the dark depths of the ocean and are solitary, though they do scoot out with tuna and other birds as scum birds. Actual birds, of course. Like other types of relatives to tuna. Now obviously they're very flat. They're basically found, there's different species found across the world. And basically just feed on whatever they can. Other than like great white sharks and mako sharks, they don't really have many other predators. And pretty much just eat whatever they can, like a lot of other species. So even though we say warm-blooded, it's technically not really the same way that a mammal is. It's not able to maintain its body temperature in the same way a mammal is. It's more able to retain it, similar to other species that are like leatherback sea turtles that are able to better regulate their body temperature than others. So it's not like full homeothermy like a mammal, but it's still very able to control its body temperature with like insulating layers of fat and being able to carry water to to the heart and warm the gills. So now we'll move on back to the sperm whales if we can get a chance. So isn't it scary to see how dark the ocean is? There we are, we can just hang out with them. Look how huge these animals are. Now sperm whales are just one of the most interesting, to be honest, one of the most interesting whales in the ocean. They are the largest toothed predator to ever exist, getting huge. Mature males can get up to 20 meters long, and most of that was a bit yuck. Oh, now we can't even hang on to it. We'll have to wait for him to come back. We can see that 1/3 of their head makes up their whole body, and it's filled with something called spermaceti, which was believed to actually be where sperm was stored in specimens, and then they found a female and said, oh, that's not sperm. So it's actually a type of wax that was used a lot in whaling times to light candles, which allows them to dive faster, because in their head they have this spermaceti, which is when they want to dive down, they make it cooler, so it's goes solid and allows them to sink to the bottom faster. And when they want to dive up, they pump it full of warm blood, which makes it melt, so that means they become lighter than the water and allows them to go up the water column faster, which is very, very cool. They broke a lot of records. They also have the largest brain of any animal. They also have the loudest calls, which the loudest calls that they can make are 230 decibels, which is a very loud click, which they even use to disorient prey. So they can make a focus beam of sound and use it to disorient their prey. Just super, super cool, I'm not gonna lie. And it's very cool, so get very big. Things I can say. So you can see that they have these very big heads, and they also use they only have one nostril, and the other nostril's been converted to something called the monkey lips, which is like an organ that produces claps, so they're able to better control their clicks. So that's not gonna be able to get a swim with those for long. They don't like it. And one thing that the spermaceti also does is help amplify their clicks. So kind of like they have a built-in what do you call them? I forgot what you call them. But they have it can amplify their sounds as they go from the monkey lips. It goes through the spermaceti and then echoes out through their head and allows them to actually focus their calls as well, which is very interesting. They're often very, very deep diving. They're very specialized to dive down deep and hunt prey, like the giant squids that you see here, but obviously we're not going to cover them right now. So they're very much primarily feeding on squids, but they also eat other small fish and whatever really they can get their jaws on. And they have very complex dialects and live in very complex social groups, similar to orcas. And they've even been known to, there was a story of a deformed bottlenose dolphin that was taken in by a pod of sperm whales, which is very interesting, because the females, they live in very complex pods. They live with their calves, of course, and they live in the cooler, temperate waters, and the big males tend to live down in colder waters, like around New Zealand and Antarctica, where they can find the bigger squid and get stuck into these larger fish. And they're also quite aggressive, because the females don't have teeth, but I'm pretty sure the females don't have teeth, but the males have these really big teeth that are able to basically gore each other with them. They also find with a lot of them that they have scars from battles with giants and colossal squids. And one thing that they were really populations were very damaged by whaling, just because they were so prized for their sumaceti, and the numbers believed to number over 1 million, and then it depleted. And one thing that made them even easier to catch was that when the whale often is injured, the whole pod will circle around it to protect it, which basically made them sitting ducks for the whalers to kill, which is sad, of course. But now there's been, of course, a lot of people, like especially down Kokura, a lot of people will appreciate them and go whale watching and just appreciate these magnificent animals as they're being protected and their numbers are coming back, which is obviously very excellent. And yeah, it's just such a majestic animal, probably one of the most interesting species of whale there is, just because of their weird shape and all that. Very cool species. So I think now we'll move on to, since there's nothing really else large, we'll move on. We'll go down to the bottom there and talk about tube worms. Now these are the type of tube worms that live, they're called giant tube worms, of course. They live around hydrothermal vents, and they often filter out bacteria and such from they filter out nutrients from the hydrothermal vents, and the bacteria that they have a symbiosis with are able to take in these nutrients and convert them for something both them and the tube worm to use. So the tube worm is like, okay, I'll give you a home, and then the bacteria is like, okay, we'll make you food. So it's a symbiotic relationship that's really benefited them to help them live in these very poorly nutritious areas where only these vents with dangerous chemicals are able to survive. So it's another very interesting symbiotic relationship that the animals in the ocean use to survive. And they get up to about 1.5 meters long, and they're actually very slow metabolism, so it takes about 2 years for them to grow. We've got a moon jellyfish, we already talked about them. Let's see what else would be super fun. Here we have a black scalbard fish, which look very weird, don't they? They're a very deep sea species fish found in the Atlantic Ocean between 180 and 1700 meters, and they get up to about 3.6 feet long, or about 110 centimeters, but usually get up to about 80 or 85, so they're large ones. So they're often found around the depths, coming at night to feed, and they eat like crustaceans and other fish and cephalopods, whatever they can get their jaws around. And being so long and pointy, it allows them to easily swim around and catch prey. And they have an iridescent tint that helps them better camouflage as well. There we see them eat. There's a lot very curious about the life cycle of these fish. There's not much known, because they believe that the feed around the fisheries in the Faroe Islands and the British Isles, and then they move towards Portugal and start spawning there, and then they often, when they grow up there, the adults move into more of the Atlantic. So the larger ones are from the north, and the southern ones live in the warmer areas. So they get bigger as the ocean gets colder, because of nearing the Arctic. Yeah, along with these, a lot of other species of deep sea fish, they've been found with a lot of toxins in their body as well. That was one too. So the moon jelly will easily move up to another fish. They seem to like that. Here's the opal that we were talking about before. Yeah, the bat scallopfish is very interesting, and obviously with a lot of the species Another thing is chemicals like mercury spreading through the food chain, and as the base of the food chain gets affected with taking in too much mercury, it can reach dangerous levels when it reaches large animals like dolphins and other large predators, so it can be very damaging to these ecosystems. So let's see if we can find all the black scarlet fish. No, I don't think we need to look for those. We'll look at hatchet fish. There's a giant squid, we don't need to look at them. Okay, we don't need to want that. We want the hatchet fish. There we are, we've got a hatchet fish. Now, hatchet fish are obviously getting eaten a lot. Which is a little bit sad. See if we can find another one. There we are, we can see a whole school of them. Look very weird, don't they? So they're a very small species of deep sea fish, similar to Atlantic fish. They're found all across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, along with the Atlantic. And they, like other species, they often have these pores that they can use to produce light from. You can see here, here's a good example. And they are very, very skinny fish. They look kind of spooky, don't they? Which really gives it a unique appearance. There's over about 40 species of them pretty much. So there's all sorts of different ones. I couldn't find that particular species, but yeah, they're very interesting. You see them flash there. The light's about. See what else we can find. I think now we've actually got the giant squid to look at now, so I think we'll go over to our very epic area here. Now, if anyone asks you why I haven't activated any pools, it's because I've already activated all these pools, so that I've already got all the species. I've even got the achievement for it, so that means every species that's in the game that's locked behind those pools, I've already grabbed out of the pools. So you don't need to keep asking about that. So you can see the manta rays over there, orcas, whale sharks. So we're going to be adding to the finals species to these. Seeing a giant squid. Which is probably the most interesting of the deep sea animals that we've learnt about. I'm really happy how well they did the squids in this game. Like, you can see the tentacles running out and they look very nice. Look at that. No, that's beautiful. They try to drag us off too. So now we're going to catch on the giant squid and see if we can ride one. We can ride them. Look how big they are. Giant squids are pretty much one of the largest largest invertebrate alive, other than like the colossal squid. They don't reach the same kind of lengths. They are believed to get about 13 meters long for females and about 10 for males. Their mantles, there's been estimates of individuals up to 20 meters long, but those are not really truly documented, so this might be a little bit of exaggeration, but still a very, very cool animal. Look at that. Should just see that. It's basically one of the largest living invertebrates. So how they're adapted, they've got 8 long tentacles, and they have these 2 very long arms that stick out that they use to extend to try and catch prey. And they are found pretty much all over the world. They are found in the very deep of the ocean, of course, and they have a lot of suckers on their tentacles, which they use to grab prey. Stuff. I believe it or not, a lot of other squids, they have their brain in like a donut shape around their esophagus, so they can eat, if they eat something too big or eat a chunk of food too big, they can often kill themselves from brain damage. That's some weird issue that I don't think a lot of species will face. And being basically the second largest, even though they're longer than colossal squids, they tend to be a lot lighter than colossal squids, because colossal squids are very robust. And they're not very much known about their life cycles, but they have been estimated to only live about 1.5 years. So imagine an animal that size living only about 1 year or 2. And yeah, they can basically eat whatever they can. They like to eat New Zealand hoki fish and other things like that. And obviously very favourite foods are animals like sperm whales and deep sea sharks. And you often see these famous like underwater battles of sperm whale versus giant squid, which as a little kid really fascinated me. It's a very the most realistic, most epic, awesome bro thing you can do with modern day animals, not gonna lie. And basically, yeah, found all across the world, and very interesting. It was first footage of a live adult was in 2006, and then they found another one just in 2019 of juvenile giant squid, about 259 meters down. So it's very interesting to see, and obviously a lot of people think these were the inspiration for the Kraken, but of course they're not that much of a monster. They're only animals, so we need to protect the oceans to try and keep these animals alive for a lot longer, so we can enjoy them and help keep our world healthy. So now that we've done that, finished with the deep ocean, kind of want to see some light now, not gonna lie. Start ourselves a challenge, try and not get zapped. Not gonna lie, that might be just about impossible. See if you can do it though. What's the point of playing these games if you don't try and challenge yourself? We would have been spending most of it just talking about fish. Let's actually try and play it. That you're supposed to play this game with a controller and playing it with a keyboard, but it's alright, I'm still playing it fine. I have to move back and then swim up for a while. There we are, perfect. ruined our street. They ruined our second street. I don't like. Kind of like one of those things. It's like a cascade effect. Like once you get affected by it, you can't escape the next one, and it just becomes a cascade of really just something not fun. So yeah, see, this is not good, isn't it? So you have to really try and push their way through. Helping. They don't like us. We're just getting hammered. It's for a robot. At least you can't really actually die in this game, so that helps. Look at that, I thought that was a fish for a second, but it actually just turned out to be a piece of random debris. I see what you're doing there. Oof. That affected both of us, didn't it? Oh. Now we're floating. R.I.P. to the homie. Biggie White. G White stands for Great White. It's his hood name. G White, the homeboy. Look at us, we're pretty banged up. Look at us, we've got like glowing. Oof, we're not looking in too good a shape. See all organs, mechanics. Exactly looking in the best condition. Though he's not looking too much worse for wear. What a poor shark. This is such a beautiful animal. Oh no. The sharks don't really have a nictating membrane, but I can understand why they'd do that, just to make it seem like it died. What a beautiful animal. One of the most majestic creatures of the sea. So what's happening now? Now we've got to find our way. Ooh, what's going on here? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I think this is where we're going to end the episode. Somewhere around here. definitely going to have to keep this for the next episode. We're going to stay here. Okay, so what we're going to do is... Okay guys, what we're going to do is say, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, hopefully you guys like and subscribe, and hopefully I should get the final part of ABZU coming out in the next few days after this one, and yeah, guys, like and subscribe, and bye bye.